Hello, and welcome back to my podcast, Cross Currents. I'm Rashid Abulsam, your host here in Houston, Texas. Today is Saturday, November 15th, 2025. It's Proclamation Day in Brazil, when Brazil was proclaimed a republic after having been a kingdom or empire under the Portuguese royal family. It is also the birthday of a dear friend of mine in Brazil, Valdeci. I'm sending her all my love and good wishes. So, my new memoir is finally being launched on November 28th, Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. And it's called Exile of the Heart, a memoir across 3 continents. And here's the front cover and the back cover. So you can see. It'll be available on Amazon. So you'll be able to order a paperback, hardback, and an ebook or Kindle version, and a audiobook is in the works. In it, I write about my life as a journalist, both in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE, and in the Philippines, and in Brazil, where I was an opinion columnist on the Middle East for O Globo newspaper, one of the largest Brazilian newspapers, for 7 years. I also write about my childhood growing up in Switzerland and in Brazil. So get yourself a copy when it comes out on November 28th. You won't regret it. Our first topic of today is, of course, the Epstein files that President Trump and his allies have been trying so hard to avoid having them be released to the public. Finally, the Democrats got the last signature they needed when that representative from Arizona, female candidate, was finally sworn in by Speaker of the House Mike Johnson a few days ago. He had vehemently refused to swear her in for months and months and months. She had been selected to fill a vacant seat in Congress, and as soon as she signed the petition asking that the Epstein files be released, a flood of emails were released, both by the Democrats and the Republicans, and nothing is looking good for Trump. It's really too bad that Jeffrey Epstein is dead, that he's not here to be questioned in person and to answer many of these probing questions, such as, was Trump involved in having, sexual relations with girls who are minors under the age of 18? In one of the emails, I think Epstein says that Trump had been left alone for hours with a girl at his mansion in Florida. I don't see how anybody can interpret that as being anything good or positive. Just because they didn't see somebody commit the act does not mean that the act was not committed. Ghislaine Maxwell, who is also equally guilty as Jeffrey Epstein, she was the one who built relationships with these underage and desperate girls and got them to come work for Jeffrey Epstein and to work as prostitutes for him and for his friends, ruining their lives. She got moved from her maximum security prison in Florida to a super low prison in Texas. And now it's just been revealed that she's been getting a whistleblower came forward and said that she's been getting tons of privileges that other prisoners there don't get, such as unlimited private visits with her friends and family members, in which they go to special rooms, and that many of these family members and friends have brought in computers unimpeded, meaning that Ghislaine Maxwell could have had access to the internet and to the whole world and to communicating with whoever she wanted, and the authorities wouldn't know who she had communicated with. Not only that, she gets as much toilet paper as she wants. The regulations in federal prisons allot 2 rolls of toilet paper every week per prisoner. So they say prisoners, of course, closely guard their toilet paper allotment every week to make it last throughout the week. And she regularly gets catered meals delivered to her prison cell, where she doesn't have a roommate. And in addition to that, she was given special access to the workout room in the prison after hours so that she could work out alone. Much of this is in Michelle Goldberg's new column today in the Washington entitled, "Why is Ghislaine Maxwell being pampered?" And she answers it herself. She says, "I can't think of an innocent reason for the privileges given to Epstein's associate." Now, as you all must remember, just before Maxwell was transferred to Texas, a deputy attorney general flew down to Texas to interview her. And in the tapes that were released of this interview, you can hear Ghislaine Maxwell saying, Trump was always a gentleman whenever I saw him on the island or at Epstein's mansion in Florida. He never did anything untowards. I never saw him in compromising situations with minor girls. And as soon as she said that, like the next week, she was transferred to Texas to this low security prison that seems more like a country club to me than a real prison. So it's really obvious that there was a quid pro quo between her and Trump, and she's holding her end of the bargain by lying about him, seemingly, to Department of Justice officials. And she's hoping to be pardoned by Trump. Trump, when asked about this by reporters at various times in the White House, he plays dumb. He says, I didn't know that about her. I haven't heard that name in so many years. I mean, he's playing completely dumb, and it's embarrassing at how obviously innocent he's trying to act about this whole thing. And then Trump has had this huge breakup with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. She has become increasingly outspoken against many White House policies, including this undivided American support to Israel. She denounced the genocide in Gaza, saying that American money shouldn't be paying for bombs that are killing innocent children and women. She's also criticized Trump for not being America first. He seems to be backsliding on many of these things, including his ridiculous tariffs that are not helping America at all. Recently, his administration announced that they were going to give exceptions for coffee, citrus products, and beef from certain countries by removing some of the punitive tariffs on them. In the case of Brazil, which exports a lot of beef, a lot of citrus, and a lot of coffee, the Brazilians had already gotten an exception for their citrus products, but their coffee and beef were being tariffed at a rate of, I think, 40%, because there was 40 or 50%, because there was a 10% so-called reciprocal tariff that the Trump administration imposed on all countries in the world. And then for Brazil, they added an extra 30 to 40% punitive tax because Brazil put former Brazilian President Bolsonaro on trial for attempting a coup after he lost the election to President Lula. And he has now been found guilty, and he's currently under house arrest with an ankle monitor that he has to wear all the time. And the Supreme Court will soon decide when he's going to be taken to a federal prison to complete his jail time. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison for this attempted coup, in which he got some of the Brazilian military to support him. Most of the Brazilian military refused to support his alleged coup that he was plotting to. So these exceptions that the Trump administration have just announced won't really help Brazilian coffee or beef producers. Of course, American beef producers are livid that Trump wants to flood the market with much cheaper Argentine beef, but really American prices of beef are ridiculous. They're sky high. As I said in a recent episode of my podcast, I bought this huge, very thick steak, but it was only good for one person, and it costs like $28 at Whole Foods. So really, beef prices are totally screwed up in the US right now. Um, Also on the Epstein files, I don't know if you guys saw Megyn Kelly trying to justify what she said years ago in a TV show that, oh, you know, if you're under 18, you can still, look as if you're older. She was trying to justify adult men having sex with these underage girls. And as many people have pointed out, rape is rape. And these girls who participated, who worked for Epstein basically, were forced to do it because of economic circumstances and because they were lured into doing this by Maxwell, who pretended to be their friend, who acted like a motherly figure, and then, you know, fed them to the dogs, basically. On the positive side of some things that Trump has announced recently, I must point out that his deal that he's trying to push through with drug manufacturers to reduce the prices for weight loss drugs such as Zepbound are excellent. According to the US government, 1 month supply of Zepbound costs approximately $500 right now. And if this agreement pushes through, which they say it has, the price for 1 month supply of Zepbound and a few other weight loss drugs will drop to $350 next year, 2026, and drop by a further $100 to $250 a month by 2027. I hope this is true because so many Americans need these drugs and are on these drugs. And I myself am taking Zepbound and it's working. It's decreased my appetite and I've been steadily losing weight since I started taking it. Moving on to our next topic. Moving back to the Middle East, there's been a lot of violence in the West Bank of Jewish settlers attacking West Bank farmers while they bring in their olive crops, which usually the olive picking season starts in October. The Israeli government and the Israeli military have been reacting against these attacks and condemning them. But the attacks keep going on. And in today's The Wall Street Journal, there's a big story, and it says violence escalates in the West Bank, and there are pictures of a mosque that was attacked by these rabid Israeli settlers who set it on fire with bombed out windows, and here a hand holding charred pieces of the Holy Quran. The Israeli government has tried to downplay the significance of these attacks by saying these were just fringe anarchist elements in the West Bank. But I beg to disagree. I don't think the Israeli state, through its police and military forces, does enough to ensure security in the West Bank against these attacks. And I've been following, there's an American freelance journalist in the West Bank who keeps going to these areas where there are clashes between the Palestinian population and Israeli settlers. And he's been documenting it. And of course, he's gotten many death threats from these Israeli settlers who are trying to basically kill and run out the Palestinian population, which is native to the West Bank. So this is very worrying. In nearby Gaza Strip, the violence has gone down significantly since the ceasefire. Hamas keeps handing over the remains of deceased Israeli hostages and other hostages. I read the other day that an agricultural worker from Nepal was handed over. His body was handed over to Israeli authorities. So on that front, Gaza seems to be relatively calm, though Israel keeps bombing certain areas. And they try to justify it by saying that they're doing this to attack Hamas guerrillas who were planning further attacks on Israel. Thank goodness Hamas has not shot any missiles into Israel since the beginning of the ceasefire, and hopefully they won't. No reconstruction, unfortunately, has started in Gaza yet, and no international forces have arrived yet. Everybody seems to be dragging their feet. One proposal was for Jordan to send some troops, but the Jordanians refused. Since half of their population is originally Palestinian, they said it would be a huge risk, security risk for them to do that. So we just have all these rumors floating around of saying, oh, the Egyptians will provide troops. Um, you know, this other country will provide troops, and we just have to wait and see. And finally, let's talk about the visit of the Syrian president to Washington, D.C. this past week. Ahmed al-Shara'a, who used to be on the most wanted list of the U.S., there was at one point a $10 million bounty put on his head. Some people say it's still on the State Department website. The U.S. has lifted many sanctions that it had against Syria. It seems that President Trump is really intent on cozying up to the new Syrian leader who successfully overthrew the brutal Assad dictatorship in Syria that had been in power since 1970 and killed many, many Syrians and tortured and imprisoned many, many more. The press were not allowed into the Oval Office during Shara's visit to Trump, but later pictures were released by Syrians who were at the meeting. And then later still, some videos were released of President Trump spraying Shara with his own brand of men's cologne and telling him, oh, it smells really, really good. And he gave him the bottle as a present. And then he also has a woman's version of his perfume, and he handed it to Shara and said, this is for your wife. And by the way, how many wives do you have? And Shara laughs and says, I only have one. So that was sort of a strange interaction. Sort of responded to critics about Shara having been an Al-Qaeda, a terrorist leader, by saying, all of us have difficult times in our past and we just have to overcome them. So it seems like Trump and the U.S. government want to completely redo Shara's reputation and turn him into a swift ally of the U.S. and of Israel. Because I saw a picture of Shara in the U.S. shaking hands with a Jewish rabbi of Syrian origin. So it really seems that perhaps Syria down the line will formally recognize Israel and have relations with Israel. I doubt this is going to happen anytime soon. Syria has many, many other problems it has to resolve first. Shara said that he was against a proportional representation of the various sects in Syria, such as the Druze and the Christians and the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims. He said we don't want to have what Lebanon has, which is a very complex system and very delicate system that is easily whacked out of shape by any sort of reaction to perceived misdeeds by one group to the other. So in that respect, I understand what Shara is saying. Saudi Arabia is really supporting him also and has pledged money to help rebuild the Syrian economy. Of course, it is to the benefit of all neighboring countries of Syria, and one of them is Saudi Arabia, which has a border with Syria, to have a peaceful and prosperous country next to them. So I really, really hope that Syria manages to overcome its many problems and to be able to revive its economy and let its people be able to have a decent life and a decent income when the country improves. But speaking of Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is due in Washington on Tuesday for a state visit, his first one in 7 years. On the agenda are a mutual defense agreement that Saudi Arabia wants with the U.S. and U.S. nuclear technology to help the Saudis build nuclear energy plants in the kingdom. The kingdom has been on a big push to find alternative means of energy production. So it's invested heavily in solar energy and in wind energy, because doing so helps free up a lot of oil that Saudi Arabia is a great producer of for export. Because it is estimated that around, I think, 1/3 of Saudi Arabia's oil production goes towards electricity production in the kingdom. And of course, since the kingdom has very high temperatures, it has a lot of electricity consumption for air conditioning and other such things. So it'll be interesting to see if the kingdom is able to go ahead with these things. Of course, having nuclear energy plants would also help in producing power. Of course, many people are worried that the Saudis want to acquire a nuclear weapon to be equal to Syria in the future, not Syria, be equal to Iran in the future. Of course, Iran has had a nuclear energy program for many, many decades, but we'll have to wait and see. I don't know if the US is going to agree to the Saudi terms for this nuclear cooperation, because the Saudis do not want to sign the same sort of agreement that the UAE signed with the US for their nuclear program, in which all their nuclear material would be sold to them by the US, and all of the waste would be sent back to the US, so leaving the UAE with no real capacity to build nuclear weapons with enriched uranium. The Saudis do not want that, and Saudi Arabia does have its own uranium deposits, so it technically could be independent in terms of sourcing its nuclear minerals. So we'll have to wait and see how this all folds out. So I hope you've enjoyed my podcast this week. Please like and subscribe to my podcast. It's available here on YouTube and on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.